On the 31st of October 1917, in the far reaches of Ottoman-controlled Palestine, a small town called Beersheba would be the centre of a desperate struggle between the forces of the British Empire and the Ottoman Empire. It was here where men of the 4th and 12th Australian Lighthorse regiments would make history with one of the greatest cavalry charges of history. The Lighthorsemen from 1987, directed by Simon Windsor, focuses on this epic moment in history, with the film being centered on the Battle of Beersheba and the events leading up to the battle. The film also shows the lives of the men in the Lighthorse regiments, depicting their escapades of sabotage, espionage, and ambushes on Ottoman forces during the Palestine campaign. Now, for some important historical context for the film. With World War I breaking out and the Ottoman Empire siding with the Central Powers, Britain now had a hostile enemy on their Egyptian border. After the initial incursion into the Sinai Peninsula and an attempt to try and take the Suez Canal by Ottoman forces, they were pushed back and put on the back foot, being pursued up the Levant by the Egyptian Expeditionary Force under the command of General Archibald Murray. After a slow start to the British campaign against the Ottomans in the Levant, the British were able to push the Ottomans back to Gaza, but their advance was stalled after 2 failed attempts to take Gaza. This is where the film starts, showing the Second Battle of Gaza and the British failure to capture the city. It's here where we are also introduced to the Australian Lighthorsemen and are shown their fighting style of dismounting and then fighting on foot. This is because the Lighthorsemen were not your standard cavalry. They are a cross between infantry and cavalry, more akin to a dragoon than a hussar.
Cavalry, sir.
They are not cavalry, Captain. They are Australian Lighthorse, mounted infantry.
While some regiments of Lighthorsemen were equipped with sabres like cavalrymen, most regiments were equipped with their bayonets that would act like sabres if needed. Now, unlike the Western Front, the Sinai and later the Palestine campaigns were fought in a very different way. With trench warfare essentially making cavalry redundant on the Western Front, their importance had been greatly diminished, but the vast open stretches of desert in the Middle East were ideal for cavalry. The open stretches allowed them to maneuver and roam far greater distances, outpacing infantry easily, being extremely useful as scouts and saboteurs. The only downside to this was that operating in the desert for long periods of time required a lot of water, and if that demand wasn't met, it could lead to disaster.
We're fighting in a desert. Warfare in its purest form with one inescapable rule: men and horses must drink.
This approach led to a very different type of warfare, where combined arms warfare was utilized more often and to great effect, especially in the later years of war, with the introduction of tanks and planes on the battlefield. With all of that out the way, the film revolves around 4 soldiers from the 4th Australian Lighthorse Regiment, following them from their arrival in Palestine to them being used on a variety of different missions, all with the backdrop of the Palestine campaign. Our 4 main characters are Peter Phelps as David Mitchell, John Blake as Scotty Bolton, John Walton as Taz, and Tim McKenzie as Chiller. Out of the 4, Dave Mitchell gets the most character development, with him being a new recruit having to face the realities of war. He also develops a relationship with a nurse called Anne, played by Sigrid Fortin. The other 3 don't really get much in the way of development to their characters, rather they get developed as a group, and as the film goes on, Mitchell gets more and more accepted by the 3, and they start to forge bonds of comradeship. While these 4 are our main characters for most of the film, there are some pretty important side characters that add to the overall story. These characters are Anthony Andrews as the British intelligence officer Maynard Hagen, Bill Kerr as Lieutenant General Harry Chauvel, and Anthony Hawkins as General Edmund Allenby. While they are not major characters, they are very important to the overall story, but they're also there for the historical context. General Allenby came up with the plan to attack Beersheba after the failure of the 2 attacks on Gaza, as he saw Beersheba as the only way to break the Gaza-Beersheba line. Along with his intelligence officer Miners Hagen, planting the fake intelligence which would allow the British to take Beersheba by surprise if the Turks and Germans bought the fake evidence, Lieutenant General Chauvel is also a crucial character, as he is the one who ordered the famous charge on the town. The Battle of Beersheba and the charge that follows are the epic climaxes of the film, with the British and Anzac infantry attacks stalling and time running out to capture the town due to dwindling supplies and water. Lieutenant General Chauvel orders the 4th and the 12th to commit the daring lightning attack across open ground to try and storm the town in hopes of capturing it with the wells intact. Facing entrenched infantry supported by machine gun and field artillery, the orders seemed to be downright suicidal. Regardless, the Lighthorsemen formed up ready to face down their ultimate doom. What we witness next is the best scene in the entire movie. With Dean Semler's fantastic cinematography, we are treated to gorgeous wide shots of the horsemen charging. You can really feel the speed and desperation in the Lighthorsemen, as you know they might have to make the ultimate sacrifice, with the accompanying action being brutal and real. This is all tied together perfectly with Adrian Carr's great editing for this scene. The quick cuts between the Turks and the horsemen really builds the tension perfectly. Then the long takes combined with the wide shots of the horsemen allows you to take in the spectacle of the charge. The scene is just perfect, and in my opinion does justice to the men who charged that day. Another note about the great cinematography is it is one of the film's standout elements, with cinematographer Dean Semler being responsible for it, having some of the gorgeous wide shots that are very reminiscent of David Lean's epics like Lawrence of Arabia and Dr. Zhivago, along with some of the shots reminding me of Akira Kurosawa's Kagemusha. I mean, just look at some of these shots, it's absolutely gorgeous. Even with the entirety of the film being filmed in Australia, it still manages to capture the look of Palestine with its rough and arid landscapes. While the film has some great battle sequences and amazing cinematography, the film lacks in other areas, namely the bad pacing at the start of the film. It's extremely fast, and while it does introduce us to our main character, it barely spends any time developing his character while he's in Australia. It just quickly switches to the Battle of Gaza, which makes the start of the film feel disjointed. Another criticism I have is against some of the editing choices. While the charge scene is great and well edited, there are some parts of the movie which do these strange fade outs which makes the scene that has the fade out seem to end abruptly. This isn't necessarily a criticism, but a lot of the acting is just mediocre. It's not bad, but it's nothing special, leaving you wanting more from the actors. It leaves some scenes feeling a bit dry, especially with the more emotional scenes. So overall, I would say that it doesn't necessarily hurt the film, but it also doesn't add anything to the film either. The last main gripe I have with the film is the music. While there is a soundtrack, it isn't anything special and often falls by the wayside, which is a blessing and a curse, as the lack of a soundtrack lets a lot of the action scenes breathe with the rawness of the violence. But then more emotional scenes leaves you wanting more, and the charge scene would have benefited greatly from having a better soundtrack. It's honestly quite sad, because I think that if the film had a better soundtrack, it would have complemented the film better, like how the soundtracks for Gettysburg and A Bridge Too Far uplift their films, especially during certain scenes. Now, with every historical movie, there are going to be some inaccuracies due to the creative process. For the most part, The Lighthorsemen is a very historically accurate film, with the film's script being based on a novel written by Eileen Mitchell, who is the daughter of Lieutenant General Chauvel. She was able to get first-hand knowledge and was able to access her family's large collection of letters and photographs surrounding the Lighthorsemen regiments. Ian Jones, who wrote the script, was very interested in the Lighthorsemen and actually visited Beersheba and spoke with many Lighthorsemen veterans, along with him supposedly doing extensive research of the period. To his credit, the uniforms, arms, and even tanks are period appropriate. For example, the Lighthorsemen's uniforms are very well done, even down to having the right unit emblem for the 4th on the right and left shoulder. This extends to the rest of the film, with the film having a very authentic look. Even given its $10 million budget, which today would be around $30 million, it still manages to produce a decent result for its epic scale. The Lighthorsemen are accurately shown using the 1907 pattern bayonet when charging, because they weren't equipped with cavalry sabers. The Turks still considered them just as deadly as sabers due to the 17-inch blade length. Just like other historical films, it has its inaccuracies, with some of these being quite major and some being quite minor. One of the film's major and probably most controversial inaccuracies is the portrayal of British intelligence officer Hagen. Hagen is presented in the film of coming up with the haversack ruse. The haversack ruse involved Hagen accidentally dropping a haversack while being chased by a Turkish patrol. The haversack would be filled with false information made to look real to try and trick the Turks and Germans into believing there would be another attack on Gaza while the real attack would be on Beersheba. In the film, the haversack is brought before the character of Ishmet Bey, who is the commander of the Beersheba garrison. He is speculative of the authenticity of the information, but is then somewhat convinced that the information is real by a German intelligence officer. While the haversack ruse definitely happened, who came up and committed the ruse has been under debate for many years now. The effectiveness of the haversack ruse has also been called into question. In the film, the information was brought to Ishmet Bey, but it was actually brought to Friedrich Freier Kress von Kressenstein, who was the German commander in Gaza, and he was doubtful of the authenticity and dismissed the documents as being fake. Even with dismissing the documentation as being fake, he decided not to send any reinforcements to Beersheba before the battle. According to reports into the Yildirim Army Group on the 18th of November 1917, 18 days after Beersheba had fallen to the British, von Kressenstein thought that Beersheba had sufficient forces and defences to hold off any British attack. Even after the attack was underway, von Kressenstein refused to send reinforcements because he didn't think the town would be, quote, captured so rapidly, end quote, and, quote, did not see the need to send reinforcements, end quote. He would later blame the 3rd Corps commander for the town's capture and for splitting his reserves. I understand why the film used the haversack ruse as a major plot point, as it gives a good explanation for why von Kressenstein refused to send reinforcements, and when the film was being made, a lot of Hagen's exploits hadn't been challenged and were often accepted as fact. Brian Garfield argues this point in his book, The Hagen Mystery, The Life and Legend of a Colossal Fraud. Another major inaccuracy from the film was the blowing up of Beersheba's wells. Now in the film, German intelligence officer Reichert, who seems to be a fictional character, blows up at least 4 of the wells before being stopped by Scotty. In reality, the Turks only blew up 2 of the 17 wells in the town, and according to Mesut Uyar, who is the Associate Professor of the Ottoman Military History at the University of New South Wales, the engineers were unable to blow up any more wells because some of the engineer units meant to destroy the wells were still on the front lines instead of in position to destroy the wells because of the lightning-quick attack of the Lighthorsemen. It caught many of them off guard, leading to the 12th Regiment capturing the town before any more could be destroyed. While it's not impossible, it's highly unlikely that Scotty would have been in the town to stop the explosions going off, since Scotty was a part of the 4th Regiment, not the 12th. The 4th and the 12th both charged Beersheba together, but the 4th attacked the frontal trenches while the 12th pushed beyond the trenches to attack the redoubt and capture the town. The scene between Scotty and Reichert is heavily dramatized, and while it's a good scene, it most likely never happened. A minor inaccuracy is when the plane flies over the Lighthorsemen and drops the bomb on them. From my research, I found no evidence to suggest that this ever happened. There was an aerial attack on Tel El Saba, which was east of Beersheba, by Ottoman forces after the Anzacs had captured it, so I'm not sure why it was included in the film. Another small inaccuracy is in the scene where Reichert is being driven through Gaza. The flag on the car is supposed to be the flag of the German Empire, but it's wrong. Instead of the black, white and red tricolour, the flag on the car is red, white and black. Essentially, it's the wrong way around. It seems someone must have put the flag on upside down by mistake and no one noticed it since it has all the right colours. Not really an inaccuracy, but there's a map in the background of Ishmet Bey's office in his headquarters which seems to have the 1829 Ottoman borders, which is kind of strange since the borders of the Ottoman Empire had changed a lot since then. The borders on the map are not even entirely accurate to the 1829 Ottoman borders, nor any borders of the Ottoman Empire that I could find, so it's hard to tell. Just another strange inclusion. Overall, The Lighthorsemen is a good and authentic Australian war film depicting the lives of the Lighthorsemen and their famous charge at Beersheba, having a strong Australian core messaging of comradeship and coming of age. With its spectacle of a charge at the end, it's not something to be missed, and the film delivers some great action. While it does somewhat fail in its more emotional moments, it never lingers on them for too long, and while it doesn't compare to the likes of its contemporaries like Breaker Morant or Gallipoli, it certainly carves itself into the Australian identity. I do recommend it. It's a good 7 out of 10.